I don't think anybody gets into foster care thinking, I'm going to do this for like 15 years and take in 40 kids. You just think, yeah, I can do this. And every time they would call for a placement, even though Don and I had said, hey, we're finished. If
Yeah.
there had been something that was a lot of trouble, or if we felt that it was rocking the dynamics, we wouldn't disrupt a kid. But,
Hmm.
once they moved on, many times we said, okay, we've done our thing. We're not going to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And then they would call and say, well, you just listen, you're perfect for this child. And, da,
Yeah.
da, da.
I am here with my Aunt Pam. My Aunt Pam, I might need like a family tree to be like pictured right here to kind of show how we're related. But this is actually my mom's aunt, and her four biological children are close in age to myself and my sister. And so we grew up really close to them. And through my early years, what I always remembered about going over to her house was just, okay, who's going to be at the house? There was always going to be, maybe a new kid. And at a young age, I really didn't understand exactly what was happening with that. It just felt like such a loving, open, inviting home. And, as I got older, I figured out that those were kids who were in foster care that her and her husband were caring for. And that's really what started to pique my interest. And so, Pam, like I've told you this before, but you are like the reason that I know about foster care and why I'm on this journey with John. And so I would just love to hear what started you on the journey many years ago. And if you want to talk about how things even changed from, when you guys started to your most recent experiences.
Okay. I mean, back as far as I can remember, I always wanted to be a mom. I loved playing mom, playing teacher. I mean, I loved kids. And my biological family, I have two brothers, but they were much older. They're like 17 and 21 years older than I am. So I grew up essentially an only child, which I absolutely detested and wanted to bring people in all the time. I can remember begging my parents to take in foster kids, exchange students, anybody. It wasn't going anywhere. They didn't think strangers belonged in your house. I just got shut down. So the happiest times that I can remember is when my nieces and nephews, who were about 5, 6, 7 years younger than me,
Mm-hmm.
were over, because that was the only sense of family I ever got. So like fast forward, I took that interest in having a family into my profession and, became a school psychologist, worked with a lot of kids who had, learning challenges, behavior challenges, and those were the kids that I was just drawn to. I really
Mm-hmm.
liked them when they were sassy and talked back and gave me trouble, and those were my people.
The
Um,
troublemakers.
that's right. That's right. That's what I wanted. Little did I know it was really preparing me for one of my biological children, but that's a whole different side. When my husband and I met, the one thing that really drew us, although I was nothing like anyone he had ever dated before, he was very different from who I had dated. But the one common factor is we both wanted a family more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that was it. That's the only thing that we went on, is that we wanted to have this home full of kids, and we didn't know where they were coming from. So after another thing that I always wanted growing up was a sister. I had these two brothers who were really pretty worthless. I didn't really want them. I just wanted a sister. Um, and when our first two kids were born, a boy and a girl were born, as soon as the daughter started talking, she started this sister thing that I had had, which really pulled at my heartstrings.
Right.
And I thought, by hook or by crook, I got to get this kid a sister, because I always wanted a sister.
And then I
So,
know the last two.
right. And then, after she had three brothers, she said, Mommy, please don't have any more babies, because you don't know how to have a girl. So
Oh my goodness.
we figured that sister had to come from someplace else. So I was doing an internship at the children's home and found out about this foster to adopt program that they had. Well, I was doing like a summer remedial program for them. And Don and I talked, and immediately, he said, yeah, he said, we kind of got this parenting thing down. Why don't we try doing that? We'll adopt a baby that way.
Yeah. And how
Um,
old were your kids? How old were your kids at that time?
Barry wasn't born yet. Ashley was maybe 6, Evan was 5, and Brian was like a toddler. So that's kind of where we were.
Mm-hmm.
And we got it. We went through the licensing just because we were going to adopt a baby girl, and then that was it. We would be
Mm-hmm.
finished. So we did get licensed, and just about the time we were ready to be licensed, I found out that I was pregnant, and I was also in a doctoral program, and like craziness, I didn't belong having another baby anyway, but that's what happened. Kept going with the doc program, had my baby. And when he was, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months old, we got a call. Hey, we have a placement of a newborn for you. And
Wow.
Don and I just said, oh my God. And then we both took a step back and said, this is what we wanted. This is what we
Mm-hmm.
signed on for. This is what so, we'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
And so we had 2 newborns, and that was our first placement. So anyway, he was, of course, it was a boy. It wasn't a girl.
Mm-hmm.
And
Poor
he
Ashley.
he went back and he was reunified, and so along this journey, it was quite a while before we ever were presented with a baby again that we could adopt.
Okay.
We kept getting, and probably because of our expertise,
Mm-hmm.
we got boys with ADHD who were like 6, 7, 8, who
Yeah.
had tons of behaviors. So that's what we kept getting. I think Ashley had totally given up on me at this point. She thought I didn't get it at all. It was just
Now,
getting more nasty brothers.
yeah. And so at that time, were you already classified as like a therapeutic home because of your?
We switched over to therapeutic mainly because of my expertise.
Mm-hmm.
I figured that, I kind of had some background in dealing with kids with challenging behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
I also understood the entire IEP, system
Yeah.
because of being a special educator. And that kind of became my secondary goal. I
Mm-hmm.
figured if these kids that were kind of problem kids and were being just medicated and left to go, if
Mm-hmm.
I could do something else to help them, at least for the short period that they were with me, I'd
Mm-hmm.
make certain that the testing was done, that their meds got right, they got their
Yeah.
needs documented, and then whether they reunified or moved on, at least that piece was in place. So that was kind of, my
Yeah.
goal to do that. I also saw a lot of things that were not being done well.
Mm-hmm.
And that really, I think, frustrated me and got me to dig in deeper and
Mm-hmm.
see that there was a need to really be there. I got to know a lot of foster parents who were not in it for the same reasons that we were. And that was alarming to me.
Yep.
I think the system was treating them incorrectly, and putting little kids on a cocktail of psychotropic medication really bothers me,
Yeah.
and I saw a lot of that happening. So I think that's definitely where the therapeutic bent, and the acting out little boys that we wound up
Yeah.
having most of the time, came from. Quite a ways down the road, we did have a newborn that was an adoptive placement with us, and this was a baby girl fresh out of the hospital. She stayed with us for, I think, 3 or 4 months, and a biological father that nobody knew existed came up, and our baby was taken away from us. And at that point, I closed the door. I said, this
Really.
will never happen to me again.
Yeah.
I watched it tear Ashley apart, tore our whole family apart, and I said, okay, we're not adopting anymore.
Going into that, you were told it was going to be adoption, like that was the goal.
So from that time on, we had found, because, there were a lot of different kids that had been placed at that point, we found that having a child who was kind of in the middle of our bio kids is what worked best for us.
Mm-hmm.
Our oldest child is a pretty strong, controlling personality,
Mm-hmm.
and she was well aware that she was, kind of the queen of the roost, and
Mm-hmm.
had kept these little brothers in line,
Mm-hmm.
and bringing in somebody over the top of her really didn't work well,
Yeah.
so we figured that out.
And people talk about birth order a lot, and a lot of people are very strict on making sure they don't get placements that are older. Obviously, we go against that, and I don't know if, as Darcy gets older and Sawyer gets older, if that'll change. But since they're so
Mhm.
young, we haven't seen any kind of like a struggle or anything, but I do know many people really stick to birth order.
Didn't seem to be a problem with the boys at all,
Okay.
because they frequently had kids, especially the younger two boys. Most of the time, the foster kids were older than them,
Yeah.
and like poor Barry. I mean, he was 2 months old when the first foster
Yeah.
kid came. He
Hey,
never remembers life without foster kids.
that's
I mean,
Sawyer.
yeah.
Sawyer was 2 months old when Miss A came to us. And yeah, she's just a part of his life. He'll grow up very similar to Barry.
I mean, funny story. One Sunday, his Sunday school teacher said, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" This is Barry's Sunday school teacher, and he was little. He was probably 4 or 5 at the time, and she said, I have to ask you a question. He seems like a really smart little boy. He participates in everything. He knows a lot about what's going on, but whenever he talks about his family, it gets really confusing." Because sometimes he has a sister and two brothers. Sometimes he'll have a younger brother. Why is he making up these other kids in his life?
Like, he's not making it up.
He's not making anything up.
Oh
That's
my
the way
goodness.
it works in our house. I don't think anybody gets into foster care thinking, I'm going to do this for like 15 years and take in 40 kids.
Yeah.
That was never, you just think, yeah, I can do this. And every time they would call for a placement, even though Don and I had said, hey, we're finished, if
Yeah.
there had been something that was a lot of trouble, or if we felt that it was rocking the dynamics, we wouldn't disrupt a kid. But,
Mhm.
once they moved on, many times we said, okay, we've done our thing. We're not going to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And then they would call and say, well, you just listen, you're perfect for this child. And, da,
Yeah.
da, da. And we always had a family meeting with our kids. They, as soon as they knew that they were getting their favorite dinner, when we were all sitting down together, it's like, okay, who gives up the room this time? They knew.
So you would prepare the best dinner, sit them all down and
That's right.
say, now we got a call.
Yeah, we got a call, and somebody's given up the room. So, and that was the scenario all the time. In hindsight, and one of the things that I can get from the experience now that they're adults is, and if you talk to them, you would get very different stories from
Yep.
each of them
Hmm.
about whether it was good or bad or what, or they would do it
Hmm.
again or whatever. What I saw come out of them, I wouldn't change for anything in the world. They're kind, caring, accepting, compassionate,
Absolutely.
wonderful people. And I really think what we did to them growing up had something to do with that.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. And
you know,
I can attest to that, because every single one of your kids, they're just good people. And you don't get that. You don't get that all the time.
I think the one of my four who appears to be the most hard nosed, is Brian. The funny thing is, when he was in preschool at UC, because I was in the doc program, so he went to preschool there, he kept talking about his best friend Johnny, and all the time Johnny was his best buddy, and he and Johnny did this, and he and Johnny did that, and you get kind of a mental picture of who Johnny is. One day, I thought, I'm gonna just like go in the observation room and watch him, and I kept looking, like, who's Johnny? He was kind of glued to this little kid who was a little girl who was Chinese, didn't speak any English, and had Down syndrome. He led her around and he did stuff with her, and he always seemed to be kind of taking care of her. But, well, where's Johnny? He always talks. That was Johnny. That was his best buddy. I think because most of the kids that came into our house were his age,
Mhm.
just because that's kind of where they fell. He was the one that was getting on the bus with them, watching what was happening with them at recess and
Yeah.
intervening. And even though some of them had crazy behaviors and were wildly embarrassing, he still had their back,
Yeah.
and that's a trait that Don and I couldn't have done that any other way. He has to be like in the trenches and live
Yeah.
in it.
As John and I were getting licensed, I think we had maybe like talked a little bit with your kids. And I can't remember who said what, but I am going to reach out to them to see, of the four of them, if any of them would want to talk about what they experience, because, you know, for me personally, I know it can, you know, support us as we move forward, as Darcy and Sawyer get older and learn and adapt. But also for everyone who watches the channel to really see the good and the bad.
Mhm.
And, you know, even without kids who are coming into your home through foster care, you know, your kids are going to have good and bad, you
Right.
know, and they're going to have friends, and they're going to have, you know, coworkers as they get into, you know, their teen years, you know, people who are playing sports with them. And I get this question a lot with Darcy and Sawyer. People have a lot of opinions on, you know, one, the safety, you know,
Right. I
how
knew
are
exactly
we,
where you
yep,
were going.
you know,
Yep.
why, how do you keep your kids safe? Which of course I immediately say, you know, safe from what?
Mhm.
Because, you know, these are kids. These are kids who are coming into your home. Yes, they may have trauma. Yes, they may have behaviors. And, you know, the open communication, so how you communicate while a placement is in your home, you know, and just those different dynamics when you have your biological children, and, you know, how you navigate that.
We received those questions and that criticism all the time as the kids were growing up. Is like, how can you subject your children to this?
I've even had multiple people saying, you know, how could you take the time and the love away from your own kids by having foster kids in your home? I mean, just really, really hateful things that
Mhm.
I've heard. It's
I think that taking the time and the love away from your kids, I didn't love my kids any less because I had four instead of two. I
mhm.
mean, love is love, you know, and your heart's going to open up, and you're going to be there for all of their needs, just because I think that as a mother, that's who you are. I can't
Yeah.
imagine that being any different.
Yep.
People would criticize us and say, "Aren't you afraid of what you're exposing your kids to?" You know, I would turn around and say, you are fooling yourself if you think you're going to protect your children from knowing what's going on in the world. You know,
True.
they're going to find it, they're going to see it.
Mhm.
You know, Donna and I had the same feelings about the movies they watched, and you know, if they had an interest in an R-rated movie, you know, they would open up to us and say, "Fine, let's sit down and let's watch it together." You
Mhm.
know, I don't want it to be in somebody's basement sneaking away someplace. I want it to be in front of us so we can have
Yep.
a dialogue about it, you know, and
Absolutely.
that's the only way they're going to really understand our values and how we look at something, is if we're completely open with what's going
Yeah.
on, you know. And I think that was the same thing about other kids, you know, because they would share with our kids, you know, the
Mhm.
life experiences they've had, the mistakes that they've made, what it did to them, how
Mhm.
grateful they were to be in a place that they were safe and they
Yep.
could make a new start. And if they wanted to go to a new school and be somebody completely different, they had that option, you know. So I, you know, I don't, I never felt that they were in danger at all.